Joining me now, 2020 Democratic candidate, former Maryland Congressman John Delaney. Good to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
You are heavily focused on that or there.
Well, we want to make both of them, so we're,
working on the polling, too.
That's right.
But at the same time, so you've put out, the Washington Post actually likened this video that you put out, the Delaney Debate Challenge, they likened it to an infomercial for Ginsu knives. But you are trying to get to that magic number of 65,000 individual donors, and you have an interesting proposition. They donate $1, you donate $2 to charity. We reached out to the DNC for comment. They did not respond to our request for comment. What are you hearing from them about your strategy?
We haven't heard anything from the DNC about it. What we have heard from people is they really like it. People can donate $1 to my campaign, become involved in the campaign, and we'll donate $2 to one of 11 charities that they choose from.
And that's all to get you there to the debate stage?
It's to make sure that we meet each of the criteria that's been established, yeah.
So we'll be watching that. We'll be watching the counter. We know there are some tickers on other people's websites, too.
Yes.
We should point that out.
I mean, my campaign is about, the entire country helping people. I've always thought about how the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector can work together to solve problems. So in a way, this challenge is in the spirit of how I think about problem solving generally.
And that's a lot of what you talk about. You talk about bipartisanship.
Yes.
You don't shy away from the word capitalism. You're an entrepreneur, a successful businessman, but you also have a lot of support for social programs. Socialism, at least in some circles, has become a dirty word. How do you feel about it?
So, listen, socialism in its pure form is not the right answer, obviously, but to some extent it's a false choice. We are a capitalistic country. We have a free market system. It's the greatest innovation and job creation machine ever created. But we've always had really strong social programs. We built great societal infrastructure. We had regulation, tax policy, workers' rights to ensure that our citizens have the kind of opportunities I've had. I mean, I grew up in a blue-collar family and have had these amazing opportunities. But I grew up at a time when we cared more about supporting people. We've allowed these social programs to erode. And so really we shouldn't be having this capitalism versus socialism debate. We should be saying, how do we rebuild the social compact so that every young person in this country has the opportunities that people like myself have had? Because today, today's generation is the first generation of Americans who do better than their parents. We've let them down.
What's interesting is that you want this to be a real bipartisan approach to solving those problems. What makes you confident that you're the person that can unite not only a divided country, but a very divided Congress? Yes, you have experience in Congress, but still.
Yes, well, I was ranked one of the most bipartisan members of the Congress, so I have a track record. As an entrepreneur who started 2 businesses, I was the youngest CEO on the New York Stock Exchange. I've spent my whole career bringing people together around a common goal and getting things done. And that's exactly what we need in our next leader. We are way too divided as a country. Our current president pits American against fellow American, and we're not getting anything done. All the great things we've ever done as a country, the things we celebrate today, Medicare, Social Security, sending someone to the moon, they were done when good-minded Democrats and Republicans came together around a sense of common purpose. And that's what we have to get back to. That doesn't mean we're going to agree with each other on everything. We don't want to live in a country where we agree with each other on everything, but we deserve to live in a country where our elected officials roll up their sleeves once in a while and get real things done that matter to the American people.
There are a lot of things that you talk about that are very important to you. Public education.
Yes.
You talked about social programs, infrastructure.
Yes.
And yet some of the hottest topics on the campaign trail that we are hearing, we're doing a little lightning round here to get your take, are none of those things. There are calls to expand the Supreme Court. Where do you stand on that?
So, I think these things become arms races, right? So if we expand the court, then when Republicans get control, they'll expand the court. Where does it end, right? I think we should be reestablishing the norms in our society. I think what Mitch McConnell did to Merrick Garland was just unpatriotic. And so I understand the urge. I wouldn't mind creating an additional seat for him because I think he deserves it. But in general, going down this path where we just expand the court because we're in control, then they'll expand the court when they're in control, I don't think that leads us to where we want to be.
Getting rid of the Electoral College and really giving people their...
Yes. If I were starting from scratch, I would do that. It requires a constitutional amendment. We haven't even passed the Equal Rights Amendment yet, which is something we should have passed a long time ago, right? So I'd much rather focus on things that can get done and affect the American people. I'd much rather focus on lowering drug prices, building infrastructure, creating digital privacy legislation in this country, right? Expanding pre-K, that every kid has that opportunity, making sure community colleges is free for every kid in this country, doing real things that matter to people right, and getting them done and affecting people's lives. If I were starting from scratch, absolutely I wouldn't have the electoral college system. Right? I'm as mad as anyone about what happened last election, that Secretary Clinton got more votes and isn't our president. But I just think it's not going to change. You need the small states to decide to do it as part of the way we amend the Constitution, and they're just not going to agree to it.
What about reparations?
So again, I support thinking about how we overcome this significant racial injustice that still exists in this country, which is kind of a legacy of the most immoral thing we ever did, which was slavery. And we still have institutions in our society that I believe are unjust and particularly racially unjust, like how we fund public schools, et cetera. So I favor real programs to actually create equality in this country. What I don't favor, to quote my former colleague Jim Clyburn, is this notion of making cash payments, because I think it's impractical, it's divisive, and it's not the right way to move forward.
Before we let you go, there's a lot of talk about who the candidate will be and what that candidate will look like, especially in 2020,
Yes.
and how it just may not be the right time for a white man. How do you feel about that discussion?
I think the Democratic primary voters are going to elect the person who's the best leader, right? I think at the end of the day, that's what they're going to decide. And, I'm running in a field that's diverse, right? I think that's terrific. I think the Democratic Party uniquely, compared to the Republican Party, actually represents the American people, and you can see that in our field for president. So I think it's terrific. I think it's a level playing field. Everyone's got a shot. It's going to be a battle of ideas. And at the end of the day, Democratic primary voters are going to pick the person they believe will lead this country to a better place.
Good to have you with us. Good
Thanks
to
for
hear
having
some
me.
of your ideas.